loneliness, fatal attempts to find immortality, and yet an enormous pride. At the end of the world, Alexander erects an enormous arch to mark his achievements. And this, of course, reminds us of the walls that Gilgamesh built. They are not eternal. They are not perfect. They are like the cities that we built for ourselves, the ruins inhabited by Lilith, about whom we talked so much. Lilith, who left paradise voluntarily. This very interesting figure. Mankind has a life which is not perfect, but interesting. And it has a pride in its immortal glory that the gods cannot have. I think this is really the lesson of Gilgamesh, and it's again so amazing that Alexander has been cast into this role. So, what can we do when we go back now to the pan-Babylonian movement? What can we learn from this? Is it really true that all the mythologies in the world go back to this one revelation, to Gilgamesh? Is there a divine revelation at the beginning? Is there a divine origin for all of this? Can we go back to paradise through this sea of stories? And is Gilgamesh the one tunnel that will lead us there? I don't think so. I think, but maybe Jensen already saw this, that when you go back, yes, you will find an enormous richness. And yes, all of us here in this room are connected via this mental DNA with a sea of stories that indeed leads us back. And some of those stories are of the greatest kind, especially Gilgamesh, and the things it inspired us. The great heritage of the wisdom, of the accumulated vision about vanity, about human life, about our endless toiling that comes from Mesopotamia has been crystallized in this one epic. And this epic didn't die, but it gave life, a new life to Alexander. And yes, each of us can go back via these stories to this original revelation, but what he or she will find is the closed gates of paradise. And this is maybe the most interesting lesson that Gilgamesh tells us, and that's the tradition after Gilgamesh tells us. So, we're left with the immortal glory, the Tower of Babel that I've shown to you so many times. And also the pride that comes in the place of the reluctance to accept human mortality just as such. The epic is the immortal refusal, the immortal anger about it. And in itself an immortal monument to the way we have to live our lives. But it's not all. Because the fight with mortality, the anger about it, is motivated by one other emotion, one other theme, which is vastly more powerful. And in the epic, this becomes very clear. And that emotion, of course, is love. This really is at the core of what the poet wants to tell us. Why is Gilgamesh so angry? Why does he want to wander to the end of the world? Why does he do all these wild things? Because he is sick of sorrow, because of this love, this high love, this perfect finding of a twin soul that he is now missing. This is the spirit that enlives the whole act, the whole drama of Gilgamesh. And this brings me to the very end, as I promised you. It was around 1849, I think, that Richard Wagner, in a difficult period in his life, also in his private life, in his marriage, his first marriage, He lived in the home of one of his benefactors, a certain Wesendonck, who was married to a person called Mathilde Wesendonck. And Wagner fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him. But it was 1849, so of course it could not be. Social conventions were against it. And they suffered, but they suffered beautifully. She wrote poems for him, beautiful poems, and he set them to music. And he decided to make an opera out of it, Tristan und Isolde. And now, the horrible thing is that everything went wrong, and they had to part. They couldn't see each other again, they lost each other, they lost contact. And when finally, after a lot of frustration in the production and in the creation of his opera, finally, he could stage Tristan und Isolde in 1865, it has this grand finale where the hero, Tristan, who is in love with Isolde, who is married, has committed suicide because he cannot be with her. He dies in her arms, and at this first staging of the opera, Mathilde Wesendonck is not present. She may have never seen it in her life. And just try to imagine what this meant, this moment, when Richard Wagner himself listened to this music being staged, when he remembered those sunny afternoons in the garden when she was reading poems for him. He has done something with those afternoons. He has made them sublime. He has created what may be the most beautiful music he has ever written in his career. He has made this love which is about mortality, immortal in his opera. Listen to how she sings. And I should add that there have been many performances of this opera, and Wagner operas are sort of difficult. There's a sort of oral tradition about how you should do that. Before the war, these traditions were still quite close to what Wagner himself wanted, and a lot of that has been lost in the war. And here I think it's first of all a beautiful voice, Kirsten Flagstad, but secondly there is a kind of unrelentlessness in the motif of the waves. The castle where he dies is at the seashore. And the waves that bang on the rocks. And this motif, I think, means the unrelentless love in which he believes against everything, against death, against losing everything. This is his vision. Listen to it. rises to a kind of immortality, and we're now close to this wave motif that underlines that.
Just a question of curiosity, why is it forbidden to cite this Jensen that you were talking about earlier?
Yes, it is very strange, some of these disciplines don't have, a self-awareness that you would, for instance, find in modern French literature studies. They are very much confined to a sort of philological project in which only counts what has contributed to something else. A text edition, for instance. And within the discipline of Assyriology, these people are simply seen as lunatics. So if you cite them, you place yourself outside this sort of useful tradition, you see. So they don't really make an effort to understand their own past as a discipline. That is why I think.
another question?
Yeah.
A few slides back, there was an image of. It was quite brilliant. I can't really describe it, but.
Saffron?
Was it? I've never seen it before, so I was quite curious what it was.
What was it?
The saffron painting.
It's Mark Rothko. It's in the Metropolitan Museum.
No, not that one. It was not that painting, but it's a few slides back. It
Yeah.
was.
Tell me. More at the end than at the
Yes,
beginning?
yes. So maybe 10 slides or so ago.
You mean this one?
No, no.
Earlier?
It was yellow with blue, quite intricate.
That was a scene then.
Yeah, it almost seemed like it was like the.
It was a dome.
Yes,
Do I know what it is?
the underside of the
yeah,
that's
dome.
what I thought as
yeah,
well
it's,
too.
it's the roof of the one of the mosques of Isfahan. Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. And
It's
it's
a ceiling.
its design is from I believe from Reza Basti, and it's supposed to be a vision of paradise. That's
Yeah,
why
I
it
could
says
look
it.
at flowers on it.
Yeah.